Good morning. I'm going to do reading again this week because we don't have church. And there's an extra reading, I guess is a way to put it. In the Catholic Church on Palm Sunday, you have a gospel reading at the procession when everybody enters the church. And then you have, the usual readings, including the very long Passion gospel reading. So what I'm going to start with today is the gospel at the procession, which in this case is Matthew chapter 21, verses 1 to 11. But I want to give a little background first. First, in case you're thinking I'm violating all the rules of videography or whatever, which I don't know anyway, I do know you're not supposed to film or take pictures with light at your back, because you get the effect you see right now, which is kind of a little bit of a washout and all kinds of light pouring in. Where we are right now, I think light around us, coming from behind us, enveloping us, I think it's a good thing. And I think, especially in the Easter season. So let me give you a little background as this light washes all around me. For this gospel to procession, it fulfills, it reads of the fulfilling of Jesus' intention. He'd long planned it to go to Jerusalem, and his work had been, his ministry, I should say, had been done in and around Galilee. He had not previously been to Jerusalem. And now he gets to the Mount of Olives, and from there he'd finally be able to see Jerusalem. And it was kind of a remarkable view, because on the one hand you could look and see the palace of Herod and all of the splendor, the gardens, the majesty of Herod's palace. But if you looked off in another direction, you would see impoverished neighborhoods. And above all of that, the most striking thing was the view of the temple. And it had been said about the temple that it shone at sunrise so brilliantly that you couldn't even look directly at it. So here he is finally at Jerusalem, the place where he had previously told his disciples he would be killed and then raised. And they tried to talk him out of going, but here he was. And Matthew, in this case, is writing for a Jewish Christian audience. And he really wanted to show Jesus in continuity with, in fulfillment of Jewish tradition. So what was going on in Jerusalem at the time was the Feast of the Passover. And that's a time when the people who lived there was tension. There was always the potential for some kind of violence bubbling up. They felt oppressed. And add to that impression, the Romans were there. The Roman military presence was something you couldn't ignore. And if you were going to enter the city, and the way Jesus planned to enter the city, the question came up of, how do you enter? Do you try to do what the Romans did? They would ride into a conquered area on war horses, and it's pretty intimidating. Or do you just kind of slip in unnoticed? And what Jesus did was a combination of both things. He did ride into Jerusalem, but he rode on an ass. And that was putting him in the light of not some conquering liberator, but coming in humility, riding upon an ass, a beast of burden. And that also fulfilled prophecy. So when the people saw him coming in, they took off their cloaks, they put foliage and things on the road in front of him, and they cried out, Hosanna, which translates to save, I pray. And the reaction of the Jewish authorities and the Roman authorities to the great enthusiasm greeting Jesus as he rode in the town on an ass, it shook them. It shook them because, again, this is a touchy time. And that shaking kind of portended the earthquake that was going to come later. But in this case, the earthquake coming to Jerusalem was Jesus. So gives you a little background. And now with this light surrounding me from behind, we'll do the first reading, which is the gospel at the procession. Matthew chapter 21, verses 1 to 11. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus and the disciples drew near Jerusalem, they came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives. Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find an ass tethered and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them here to me. And if anyone should say anything to you, reply, 'The Master has need of them.' Then he will send them at once." This happened so that what had been spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Say to daughter Zion, Behold, your king comes to you, meek and riding on an ass, and on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." The disciples went and did as Jesus had ordered them. They brought the ass and colt and laid their cloaks over them, and he sat upon them. And the very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and strewed them on the road. The crowds preceding him and those following kept crying out and saying, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest." And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was shaken and said, "Who is this?" And the crowds replied, "This is Jesus, the prophet, from Nazareth in Galilee."